Welcome back to another episode of Daily Dose of Anime Recaps. In this video, we'll be taking a look at the first 4 episodes of Prima, which centers around the Blue Cat Cafe, staffed entirely by automata. Formerly designed as the weapons and servants of war, the employees of this strange cafe are thrust into an unfamiliar world, a peaceful one. Before we begin, make sure to become a subscriber and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update from us. The events of Prima take place a few years after the end of war. Automata, created as the tools of warfare, now seek normalcy, peace, and purpose in the imperial capital. The Blue Cat Cafe is run by a strange engineer who restores automata with their agency and free will. The series begins on a moving train as a group of seasoned war generals sneer at the sight of a young girl. Skeptical and untrusting, their fear speaks volumes of the nature of the automata. We meet Auka, an engine of war, and her father, Professor Tuma, who both pities and celebrates this occasion. The automata prepares for battle after hearing of a Lobelia scouting party up ahead. 30 years later, we cut to a young girl, an unfamiliar automata, who wakes up on a bench. She can see a red-headed stranger who's under repair, though the stranger is entirely unresponsive. She makes her way to a brilliantly lit hall, though she is quickly drawn to a singing child outside, Chio. Before we find out the automata's name, a giant robot charges towards them. Though it aims a huge arm cannon at the two of them, the automata sings a familiar melody before commanding the machine to stop. The next scene has the automata, now named Hazakura, waking up in a stranger's office. We also meet Nagi Tuma, who repairs dolls, while also likely being a descendant of the old man we saw in the past. It becomes clear that Hazakura's memories had been wiped, and that they are now fresh. Searching for a role and purpose in life, Hazakura is happy to find out that there are other automata like her. After being invited to work at the Black Cat Cafe, it's clear that Hazakura isn't yet equipped to work in a customer-facing role, and the other automata, or mechanica as they're sometimes called, try and train her up properly. Hazakura meets Chio once again, and they share sweet roles with each other. They talk about someone called Yugiri, who is like an older sister to Chio. Through one of Chio's flashbacks, we recognize Yugiri as the decommissioned automata in the basement of the Black Cat Cafe. And Hazakura naively tries to help Chio meet her once again. However, Nagi reveals that Yugiri was once overexerted to the point that her internal system shut down, and in her current state she can't be turned active. Hazakura sits beside the inanimate Yugiri and tells her about Chio. Then during the night she sings to her. As she closes her eyes, we see them begin to glow red. Then in the morning, Yugiri sits awake waiting for her small automata companion to wake up. Much to the shock of the rest of the automata, Yugiri reawakens and reunites with her childhood friend. We then watch a peaceful and moving montage of the automata existing during a peaceful moment. As the day comes to a close, Nagi reveals to the automata that Yugiri is still broken and that her repair was a miracle. Chio notices that Yugiri seems tired and slightly depressed. The next morning it's clear what is causing this. Yugiri has no memories of Chio at all, and she wasn't Chio to find this out. Yugiri's solution to this is to leave and never return, to minimize the young girl's heartbreak. Hazakura, Chio, and Yugiri all become emotional as they all realize what is going to happen. They decide to sing together, which seems to be a reoccurring theme in this series. Before the episode comes to a close, Yugiri is deactivated and stored in a cupboard, while our main character questions if she did the right thing. Then, the last thing we see is a strange yet elegant woman emerge from her car. We then see Hazakura bringing the stranger, Nagi, and 2 official-looking men tea, and spilling it everywhere. The stranger, Otome, seems to have some prior history with Nagi, who we find out used to be involved in the military before taking up the Automata Cafe. It seems Otome has come with a warning in light of the peace agreement with Lobelia. Military use of dolls is firmly forbidden. Automata have been outlawed, and there are various factions both rooting for the tightening of this law and opposing it. The automata and mechanica prepare a gourmet breakfast for the visitors, and Karasuba explains to Hazakura that automata can control mechanica that are the offspring of their generation. Nagi then shows Hazakura a mechanica she can control, a small pet type called Inaba. Due to the pet nature of Inaba, she is allowed to go outside, which other mechanica aren't allowed to do. As Hazakura acquaints herself with her new pet, they all find out that they have run out of eggs, so Hazakura and Gekka head out to the market. On the way, Gekka gives Hazakura a geography lesson of the region, and along the way, her the castle. It turns out that Gekka can't smile, and this is due to a physical malfunction which she puts down to being broken. While at the market, they are harangued by a group of onlookers who are curious about their nature. Hazakura stuns them all by breaking into a song and asks what is her purpose. Gekka swiftly encourages her to stop causing a commotion, and they quickly try and avoid any unnecessary attention. In the market, they share a sweet roll before they decide that they realize they can only get powdered eggs instead of the real thing. Though this disappoints Gekka, who gives up on the search, Hazakura is instead determined to find eggs so that Gekka can enjoy a fluffy omelet she seems to so appreciate. Chio then gets involved and leads them to a train where a peddler might be selling eggs. They run across a bridge to intercept the train, though it's likely they won't be able to catch it in time. That is, until Gekka uses her jet thrusters to fly across the river and catch the train. Their hard work pays off as the customers eating at the cafe engorge on omelets. Chio offers Gekka some omelet and she eats it with modesty. Later, on the roof, Hazakura climbs out to meet with Gekka. They sit on the roof and watch the rising moon before they talk about their day together. Gekka reveals she was always assigned reconnaissance missions. These would have high mortality rates, though on one mission she was gravely injured. During that time, her entire battalion was slaughtered, and that is why she has serious trouble sleeping at night. Hazakura cries after hearing this, and her tears awaken Inaba. It seems that Hazakura's tears have some innate ability to awaken and reanimate malfunctioning automata and mechanica. This is the first time that Hazakura manages to link with her new pet, and it greatly excites her. At the same time, Gekka smiles, which she thought she was previously unable to do. Later, as Hazakura sleeps, Gekka is disturbed from her midnight musings by a distant mechanica hovering above the peaceful town. She incapacitates it swiftly with the help of her own mechanica, but just before she's about to execute it, she remembers Hazakura's words. Regardless, she goes ahead and finishes it off. Otome brings this occurrence up with Nagi in the morning, and the doll animator seems to instinctively recognize Gekka's involvement in this occurrence. The next episode has Tauka repairing a mute automata and apologizing that he can't do more. The only option is a full reset of her memories, just as had been done to Hazakura. We then observe Hazakura attempting to cook, though it's clear she's at her limit. Then, the mute automata, named Hokiboshi, returns to the kitchen after her maintenance is over to cover Hazakura's duties. Hazakura and Hokiboshi then cook and clean together, and the young automata gives the more experienced one plenty of praise. Then, Hokiboshi puts her hand on Hazakura's cheek, and as her eyes glower, Hazakura is shown a flashback from Hokiboshi's past in the military. Her main advice is to keep practicing, and so Hazakura does exactly that. Hazakura later asks Karasaba why Hokiboshi can't talk, and the young automata thinks that Hokiboshi plans to allow herself to have her memories wiped. Hazakura later storms into Hokiboshi's room and demands that she reconsider, and so she sings to her to cheer her up. This does make Hokiboshi happy, however she reveals that she doesn't plan to be reset, though she would really like to be fixed. In another flashback, Hokiboshi shows Hazakura that they used to be one alike. Before battle, Hokiboshi would sing to her soldiers so beautifully that they would go into battle without any fear. Hokiboshi knew this was all a scam designed to make the soldiers more effective in battle, though one day Yamei, a war general, found her writing in her diary one night. He claimed that he was her guide for the summer festival and that they were going to have an evening of relaxation and socializing before they head into battle tomorrow. She was asked to get on stage and sing for her men, hoping that her songs would instill them with the same courage and fearlessness that they had before been supported by. When on stage, Hokiboshi performs beautifully. However, halfway through the performance, she broke down into tears. Hokiboshi's internal conflict was defined by the idea that her sole purpose was to give men the courage to die, and that she has in turn played a part in the deaths of thousands. Not knowing if there were ever any survivors, Hokubushi was eventually repaired by Tauka. Though she never spoke a word since, Hazakura diagnoses Hokubushi's muteness as a symptom of sadness rather than a physical defect. She then pledges to practice with Hokubushi to help her regain her voice. Meanwhile, Gekka is in town and finds a newspaper that says the 525th Regiment are returning from the war. And though Gekka doesn't know who they are, Hokubushi would recognize them as the regiment she thought were long dead. Gekka returns from the shopping and brings back the newspaper, and Hokubushi finds out that her regiment may still have survivors. However, dismayed by doubt and shame, Hokubushi thinks that they won't remember them. Regardless, Hazakura and Chiyo blast down the pier and await the docking of the ship carrying Hokubushi's old regiment. However, as a huge crowd prepares to greet the disembarking regiment, the regiment are brought out of the ship, only they're carried inside urns. Heartbroken that there were no survivors, Hokubushi flees the gathering. Karasuba gives Hokubushi the evening off of work, knowing how difficult it must be for her today. Karasaba reveals that only the Ministry for the Repose of the Departed can say for sure. And with that knowledge, Hazakura dashes off to find out if any of Hokubushi's regiment have survived. After arriving, Hazakura meets a stranger who wants to ask about Hokubushi. Hazakura then stays the night at her house and returns to be scolded by Karasaba. The girl gives Hokubushi a letter written by her brother, and it details how the soldiers of the regiment were all saved by her tears during the festival night. Captain Yamei, the soldier with the bandaged eye, is the one who wrote the letter, and the contents of it bring Hokubushi to tears, and her voice seems as though it might work once again. They hold a procession for the deceased soldiers in the cafe, and the families of the regiment all turn up. Hokubushi leads the proceedings, and we hear her voice for the first time during the present day. She offers to sing once again for the departed souls of the 525th, and her performance is even more moving and soulful than any we have ever heard before. As she sings, we see a montage of Hokubushi and Hazakura bonding. Hokubushi even gives Hazakura a diary and fountain pen as a sign of thanks, which excites Hazakura. We swiftly move into episode 4 and see a group of soldiers removing a familiar automata from a box. We recognize her as Aoka, the girl from the first scene of the series, and they implant a chip inside of her. Her eyes begin to glow and flicker a dangerous red, and the soldiers are clearly surprised and fearful of what's happening. We then see the staff at the Black Cat Cafe doing a faux performance in front of a huge crowd, Chiyo. Karasaba interrupts them and tries to get them back to work. However, she realizes that their singing performances are actually improving their workflow and sales performances significantly. Hazakura then invites Karasaba to sing with them, though she denies them that pleasure. Later that night, when cleaning Tauka's office alone, Karasaba breaks out into song. However, Hazakura bursts into the room and finds out that she is secretly also a great singer. Hazakura then formally invites the superior to sing with them, especially after a customer has especially requested a singing performance at this night's dinner. As they practice, Kara storms out after Hazakura accidentally made her angry. It turns out that Kara can't bow due to a problem in her knee motors, and Hokubushi puts this down to the use of the word repair. Later that night, Hazakura brings Kara an apology drink, though Kara then finds Hazakura and apologizes back to her. She shows Hazakura her artificial skin and says that if you don't take care of it, it gets stiff. They link together, and Hazakura is given a portal into Kara's memories. Tauka is shown carrying Kara on his shoulders, and her body is dismembered after being discarded in the war. It turns out that Kara's body is made out of mismatched parts found in a junkyard, and that she doesn't want to repair herself to preserve how Tauka created her. Meanwhile, later that night, Tauka receives a call from Otome, which seems to have some significant news. In the morning, Tauka has to leave urgently, and Kara is given control of the safe. At the Imperial Line faction site, Tauka stands over the inanimate chassis of Aoka, who seems to have shut down. Behind her are hundreds of Mechanica who seemed primed for war. Before Tauka can leave to return with better tools, Mechanica and the dangerous Aoka are awakened. Back at the cafe, Tauka calls Kara and asks Gekka to make a delivery for him. As they call, Loud sounds can be heard in the background. These are the sounds of Mechanica trying to break down a door to get to Tauka. Though Kara is given the responsibility of looking after the cafe, Tauka and Otome are trapped inside an industrial war bunker by the Mechanica, though Geka swiftly flies over with a delivery for her master. Upon arrival, she is greeted by warring Mechanica, who try and shoot her down, but she swiftly evades them all. Worried about Nagi, Karasuba finds it difficult to work properly. Hazakura asks what she wants to do, and Kara begins to cry after revealing that she wants to be by his side. Together, they both decide that they're going to go out and help their master, and Kara and Hazakura zoom through the streets to help Tauka. The Mechanica soon begin to break down the door, and it seems they came at just the right time. While this was all happening, Tauka developed a device that would send out a stop signal to all of the Mechanica. Before he even had the chance to activate it, Kara and Hazakura appear. Though, before they can rescue Tauka, he's activated the stop signal and all of the Mechanica shut down. In the aftermath, Otome scolds Tauka and his automata for their recklessness, and we begin to see Karasuba's leg crumble away. It appears that running fast has caused irreparable damage to her components, and so Tauka offers to give her a piggyback all the way to the cafe, echoing their first interactions they had together. As he carries her back home, they both apologize to each other and their connection only gets stronger. He offers to replace her leg, however she refuses as she wants to preserve the body that her master gave her. Later that night, the automata of the Black Cat Cafe all perform their songs to a full house of customers. As Karasaba arrives, she is shocked to find out that Hazakura has scheduled her to sing. Unable to stand alone, Geka brings out a chair for her to use. They all perform together, and as expected, Karasaba steals the show. This ends the recap of the first 4 episodes of Prima Doll, which ends on a touching moment.